Hello, I'm Norma Shephard, Director of the Mobile Millinery Museum and the author of 1000 Hats. I want to welcome you today to this discussion of 20th century Canadian millinery designers. Although I confess I snuck a couple of 21st century gals into the list. Basically, we are looking at Canadian millinery designers who were either born or were making hats in the 20th century. I want to thank the Lennox and Addington Museum for inviting me to give this talk. Normally, this time of year, I would be doing live presentations almost every day of the month. Certainly for the last 7 or 8 years, we've done 4 shows every Mother's Day weekend. And so COVID has sort of, not just sort of, has certainly put a monkey wrench into that. But my time was not wasted throughout COVID. Um, I added an additional 800 historic hats to our already cataloged 2,500 pieces. These newest 800, and believe me, it was fun to see these boxes of 100 at a time arrive. They were formerly housed in a costume archive in Quebec, which is no longer funded, and they were deaccessioning pieces. So some of these were just fabulous, fabulous hats that have been, prior to now, unavailable. And so I was really, really excited to purchase them. Um, I want to say that when I thought about how I might present these 20th century great Canadian milliners, I wondered, should I organize them according to alphabetical order? Um, should I list them or, go decade by decade or region to region? None of those approaches worked for me. Certainly alphabetically was difficult because many of them branded themselves by first name, others by last name. Some did not use their names at all when they branded. And speaking of branding, I will show you a couple of pieces that are anonymous because I want you to keep in mind that although I'm listing some very successful and prominent Canadian millinery designers, every city, town, and village in Canada had its own milliner. And they, most of them are unsung. Many of them did not brand themselves or label their pieces. So that, in fact, this early piece, circa 1910, this woven straw cartwheel, this is unmarked, but it's a beautiful piece of millinery just the same. A lovely Edwardian era summer straw, gorgeous blue ostrich feathers. We have these fabric um, flowers, a little made bird. We even have some thistles on there. So that's a real sweetheart. And another category of anonymous millinery designers are those who made hats to be sold at the major department stores and at elite shops like Holt Renfrew. So those hats were generally labeled only by the store name. Just to give you a little peek at this one, this label shows Morgan's. Now this hat is from the 1960s. It's a whimsy that would have sat on a beehive hairdo and would have qualified as a hat if you know, wanted to go to church and had to wear a hat. Although this one is looks more like a cocktail piece. So I just want to mention that about the many of the pieces being anonymous. The ones that are branded, um, we're going to list them according to which millinery designers I would invite to showcase their work in a Hat Hall of Fame. And first up for me definitely would be the Montreal milliner, Yvette Brillon. So Yvette would be definitely one of my top picks for the Hat Hall of Fame. This turban-looking piece from the 1960s is a nice example of her creativity and also the professionalism of her workmanship. Beautiful satin, the way she's draped it, the combination of colors is quite lovely. And this hat, of course, um, you can call it a turban. It's a variation on the turban, but it actually is what we would call a beehive. And this was created at a time when hairdressers were giving milliners a run for their money and creating nice teased up hairdos for us. And this hat would sit quite nicely over a beehive, or you could wear it equally well, if your hair was straight. You can see the lacy lining of this piece, so very, very professionally done. We have several of Yvette's hats in the Millinery Museum, and I just want to show you a couple of others that are representative of her workmanship and her creativity. Now this one is going back further than the one I just showed you, and this is what I would call a revival bonnet. It certainly references the 19th century, but probably a spring bonnet, maybe an Easter bonnet. You can see, my goodness, the attention to detail in all of these lovely little um, light blue rosebuds. And then you have the contrast with the darker blue and smaller yet blue velvet forget-me-nots. Just gorgeous. How could you? Certainly can't forget a hat like this. Um, Blue flowers. We don't see them enough, whether, in real life or on a beautiful hat like this. So that's quite creative, quite different. And you can see the structure of the interior, and that would sit quite secure. Now, another piece that this would be circa 1960, maybe late 50s, this little cocktail hat. Again, you've got the wonderful choice of fabric. This is a pastel brocade with some gold stitching, so gold lame. And of course, this was just hugged ahead, a very nice little capote. Nothing terribly unusual about the shape of the base of the hat. But what Yvette has done here is created this wonderful sort of, it's almost like a hand. It's like three fingers or three rays of the sun that are just going to sort of clomp onto the side of your temple here, your face, your upper cheek. And she didn't stop at creating the wonderful hat. She also created these hat pins. Now these are triplets and they're adorable. They are rhinestone, of course, tips, and then the wires hidden in it comes right down through this this finger or this ray, and it terminates in a sort of a faux moonstone globe. So I will just give you a sense of how this would have been worn. So, you're all set for the cocktail party with your martini in one hand and your cigarette holder in the other, and we're taking you back to the 1950s. So, to go back even further, I'm not going to show you all of our Yvette hats, but I think this is worth looking at. This one is a classic cartwheel style, and we know the cartwheel gets its name from its shape, of course, the very flat, shallow center, and then the circular wheel. So this would sit very flat against the head, and we have the chignon strap, which is crafted with a little bit of elastic and some grosgrain ribbon. That was a common way to keep a hat from flying off. But maybe what adds to the name of the cartwheel hat is I'm sure many of these did fly off and rolled down the street and would definitely look like a wagon wheel, as they were spinning. I talked to a lot of ladies when I was researching my book, 1,000 Hats, and some told me wonderful stories of having a hat fly off, and certainly during the war, having a young soldier chase after it and return it to you. Hats were always rather highly prized, of course. So the way this is secured to the head, again, the chignon strap goes at the back of the head, and this, whoop, okay, so it goes under the hair and it's secured like this, and it gives you a wonderfully dramatic look. Another thing that I like about this early hat is that Yvette has signed it in her own hand-stitched embroidery. So this label, sorry that I'm wiggling it around here, but this label is hand stitched, and it's very similar actually in the script to what she later had professionally done. So I'd like to say that obviously the hats are a big reason why I would place Yvette Brillon at the top of this list, but it's also about the hat experience. So, and I'm not alone in declaring that Yvette Brillon was probably Canada's greatest millinery designer in our fashion history. She had quite a business. Her salon was known as the most glamorous in the country. So again, it's about the hat experience. If you're going to go to Yvette's salon, it was Art Deco all the way. I mean, how could you not spend your money once you're in there looking at all these fabulous hats and being treated so well? Maybe you've even gone to some of her fashion shows. She held them twice a year. They were held in the ballrooms of the Grand Hotels with 5,000 to 6,000 invitees. Now, some of those would be press, others would be other milliners or shop owners. Obviously, many of her clients in a big city, a milliner might have upwards of 3,000 clients that she would very likely keep files on each of them. And there's a lot to say about Yvette. Another remarkable thing about Yvette is that she made her first hat when she was 12. Now, if you contrast that to the American designer Lily Dachet, who was noted for having made her first hat at the age of 5, you have to consider that Lily took one of her mother's brand new silk blouses at the age of 5 and decided to make a hat, whereas Yvette was already apprenticing with a professional when she made her first hat at the age of 12. So definitely thumbs up for Yvette Brillon. Oop. Now next up is Irene of Montreal, another great favorite of mine. She began her millinery career in 1948 and continued it until 1976, also working professionally in Montreal. She was born in Poland, and she had a couple of other successful careers elsewhere in the world outside of the arena of fashion before deciding on millinery when she came to Montreal. A couple of reasons she told me that she started this business was that she, of course, was from Europe, and she wanted to elevate the mode of dress of Canadian women. She was rather a perfectionist, and she was also very, very keen on being successful financially. And of course, millinery was, for a long period of time, historically, an area of business where a woman could do quite well. So Irene had a reputation of making any woman look beautiful, which was quite a reputation. And when I had the opportunity to interview her, I asked her whether she really was aware of that reputation. She didn't exactly say yes, but she said she remembered the ones who were not pretty the most. And she said she would lay awake thinking about how she might create a particular hat for a new client or a returning client if the fashions had changed. So her idea was that in order to look beautiful or remarkable, was to accentuate that aspect of your looks that was maybe not classically beautiful, to actually draw attention to a big nose, let's say, or a very sharp, pointy chin, or whatever it was about you that was probably something you didn't like, but that was her magic. So, and speaking of Irene's magic, many of her contemporaries, her competitors, would trot over to her salon after hours, and you would see them with a sketch pad trying to pick up some of her magic by sketching the hats that they saw in her shop window. And she never ever had more than 3 hats in the shop window. So lot to make her great, and believe me, her reputation lasted. I spoke with many many women who were aware of her reputation, some of her competitors, people who worked in the millinery field, people who had purchased some of her hats. And they all told me that when someone was seen wearing one of Irene's hats, and a buzz went through the entire millinery industry in Montreal. So that certainly, in my books, would make her great. I just realized I haven't brought up an example of Irene's hats out of the archives, but I will post an image of one um, at the end of this video. Um, Another thing, if we think about the experience, the hat experience, if you were shopping for a hat at Irene's salon, it would be a different experience from going to Yvette's. Irene, she did keep files on each of her probably approximately 3,000 clients. But when you went for a hat to be custom made at Irene's, you could expect at least 3 fittings. Now, if on the 3rd fitting you thought the hat was fabulous and you were ready to take it home, if Irene felt that it still needed to be perfected, she wouldn't let you purchase it. So she definitely, she was a perfectionist and quite an interesting woman. I should add that Irene was not formally trained. She came at this through her own intuition and instincts. And I remember asking her if she had a favorite hat that she had crafted in all those years. And of course, she had workroom girls who she would design the hats and they would execute the millinery. And she remembered one which she described to me as being organza, and it was very large, and it would start here at the brow, come up, and very stiffly follow back down to the shoulders, but never touch the body. And when she described what she wanted to her workroom girls, they said it was impossible. They argued with her, but they didn't get very far because she said, "Just do it, just do it," and it got done, which I think is remarkable. In addition, in 1954, Irene made all of the hats for the Canadian Couturiers Association New York City Fashion Show. So, Irene, quite a girl. Her hats are rather elusive, however. There are not a whole lot of them around, partially because many of them were unsigned. We do have some in our museum, and you will find some photographed, I believe, on the McCord Museum website. So next up, I want to talk about a millinery designer who's alive and well and flourishing in her enterprise today. And unlike Irene, she has been practicing her craft at a time when hats have fallen out of fashion. So kudos to Maria Curcic for keeping the millinery in Canada alive. I want to show you this wonderful piece. This is one of her creations. Now, this is not something that typically you would purchase from a milliner. This is a piece of editorial millinery. So Maria is, she's got quite a practice going in creating hats for fashion shoots. And this is one such piece. It is a fascinator done on a hairband. And she's been featured in numerous fashion periodicals here and in Asia. And she's definitely the milliner I go to for pieces when I want to wear something for one of my millinery fashion shows. Maria uses vintage trims. She incorporates them with new materials to make some really creative designs. And what's wonderful about her pieces, besides just how creative they are and how flattering they are, is that they don't move. You don't need to worry about a piece like this slipping off. And when I do my presentations, I'm moving around quite a bit, and I always select one of her pieces to wear. I'll show you a couple of others. I could probably show you about 30, I think I have in my personal collection that I do wear. The colors are fabulous. The way she puts together the vintage pieces, the workmanship, you're not going to find any glue on Maria's hats. That's definitely a no-no if you're looking for a couture piece. And these are often done on a little elastic chignon strap. And as I say, once you get this under your hair, this is going to sit right in place. Now, she doesn't exclusively do fascinators. Maria also makes wonderful hats. This one, oh, what can I say? Do I need to say anything about this hat? It's as light as a feather, yet it's secure. She's got this asymmetry going on the crown. It's just a wonderful piece. And the colors, I mean, I can't say enough about Maria. She's also been successful in creating hats for the television series Frankie. A lot of the set in 1920s, I believe, a lot of cloche styles. So check her out. She's in BC. Maria Curcic Hats. You can find her online. And I cannot say enough about the beauty, the workmanship, and the creativity of Maria's hats. Now, another millinery designer whose hats are rather elusive is Lily Jamon. And Lily Jamon primarily made hats for Stratford, for theater. Now, I hadn't seen any of Lily's hats. I had probably already amassed 2,500 pieces, which were cataloged in the Millinery Museum, before I got a phone call from a woman who was researching Lily for an academic project. And she wanted to know if I had ever seen any or had any in the collection by Lily Jamon. I had not. But funny thing, about a week later, I was in a vintage shop in Hamilton on Ottawa Street, and I saw this wonderful hat. So, wouldn't matter who it was made by, really. I mean, I could just tell immediately that this was a quality piece. Obviously, the shop owner knew that as well, because I've actually kept this tag on. So, as a vintage piece from the 1940s, this hat now, in the modern day, sold for $50. Sure enough, when I turned it inside, wouldn't you know, it was a Lily Jamon. So there's a little bit of synchronicity for you. The quality of this hat is stunning. This is Milan straw, very, very fine straw. These hats sewn in concentric circles from the center crown. It's got a wonderful wide brim. Looks fabulous on the under brim. This could be worn to a wedding or a garden party. And this was one of Lily's early hats. We know that because of her label in here that was just hand done on velvet in her own script, circa 1940. So I have yet to find another Lily Jamon piece, unfortunately, but that certainly is a great example of her work. Okay, so let me talk about another Montreal milliner. This is Anita Pino, who was making hats from the 1940s to the 1980s, although she did not open her own salon until about 1960, at which time she had between, 60 to 80 employees working for her. I would classify Anita's hats as classic with a twist. This is a lovely little navy straw of hers. And then this winter beauty of black beaver felt has a rolled brim wrapped in satin. Almost sort of has a reference to medieval times. It would be nice to have a great jeweled pin running through here, and maybe it was worn like that. Now, another piece from the late 1960s. This would be about 1968. This was one of my very early acquisitions. This is when you could go to Value Village or the other thrift stores and find these beautiful hats. I mean, just sitting on the shelf for like $2.99. I mean, I just recognize the beauty of this immediately. So again, a classic in one sense. This is from the late 1960s, a very high-crowned variation on a pillbox. Um, but you see the very rounded crown with the flowers pressed flat to the crown, and then this wonderful rose punctuating the back. This would be a great may have been a mother of the bride hat. It might have been a bride's going away hat. Um, just a wonderful piece that has obviously stood the test of time. Anita Pino, another Montreal milliner, in my Hat Hall of Fame. Anita also found success creating hats for employees of Air Canada and also the RCMP. So that's in keeping with her sort of twist on classic styles. I want to switch now to a young milliner who is, she has a salon in Toronto, and remarkably, she has what is known as, she calls, the smallest hat store in the world. So it's a storefront in Toronto downtown that holds one hat. And this is Maryam Keyhani. Maryam, I met at a fair trade coffee shop in Toronto a couple of years ago. I had gone in to get my husband his favorite coffee to put in his stocking for Christmas. And there was a woman sitting, sketching at, I'll put a picture of Maryam at the end of this as well, sitting sketching a hat, but she was wearing the most avant-garde hat. And I realized that this was a hat that even I would not wear. And those of you who know me will realize, well, that is something. Anyway, so I determined that I had to speak to her. I had hoped that she spoke English. And I did disturb her sketching to chat with her, and we came away fast friends. And I can't say enough about Maryam Kahani and her avant-garde aesthetic. The hats that she makes, she also wears. She will wear them to pick up her child from school, wherever she's going. She just boldly wears them, and I love her spirit. At the time when I met her, I sat down and we chatted, and she showed me a sketch she was working on. It was an idea for what she called a man's collar hat. So the idea would be that the hat would sit as a collar on your head. And she wondered what I thought of it, and I thought it was quite remarkable, to the point that I had her make me a prototype, which she did. So I want to show you. This is she's a designer, and she has a factory for her pieces, but this was a prototype for the collar hat. And there's just so many things to love about this hat. To me, it references a nursing cap. I was a nurse for 18 years. It also references almost a clerical collar, and of course a man's cuff and collar. It's a fabulous piece. It is avant-garde, but I think it's also quite attractive. And I'm just, in fact, maybe you should let me know. I'm wondering about having Maryam sign this for me. I think I would like that. So Maryam Keyhani, she has a studio in Toronto. She sells online. She has been featured in numerous fashion magazines recently, including Vogue magazine and Harper's Bazaar. It goes on and on. She spends a lot of her time in Berlin. But as I say, she does have a studio in Toronto. She's an artist as well. Follow her on Instagram, follow her online. She's fabulous. And yeah, the world's smallest hat shop. She keeps a hat in there for up to 3 months. If it sells, she replaces it. If it doesn't, she replaces it at the end of 3 months. She's wonderful. And I just think it's wonderful that a young person with such artistic talent is leading millinery into the 21st century. Another pick of mine is Mr. Fleming. Born in Copenhagen, his name is Fleming Sorensen. He started designing hats in 1957 and carried on into the 1970s when hats fell out of fashion. This is a lovely example of his work, circa 1960, pink satin, beautiful hand beading on the crown, some set-in rhinestones and some faux pearls. This is just such a flattering little hat. There's the label, Mr. Fleming, Haute Mode. We have at least one other of his pieces in the museum. And what can I say? He was known for his clientele were prominent wives of prominent politicians in Quebec and in the federal government as well. So the hats were nothing that would cause a stir. They were lovely. I wouldn't say they were avant-garde, but certainly high fashion. That was Mr. Fleming. His political connections may have got him the opportunity to design hats for some of the hostesses at Expo 67, the World's Fair in Montreal. And later on, he went on to develop a wholesale millinery business out of Toronto. And you will find many of those hats quite readily. They're still in business today. You can find new hats under the Kates label, Kates, and also some vintage pieces, particularly some wonderful felts from the 1950s. So they're highly accessible and some very interesting hats to collect. So now that we've talked about Toronto slightly, I want to add Philip Ward to the Hat Hall of Fame. Philip Ward was very well known in Toronto. He showed hats at Easter and other times was featured in the Toronto Star. Held a couple of hat making contests as well, I think, for amateurs. He was known for color and drama. In fact, many of his clients who were socialites and also political wives in Ontario he was rather upset sometimes when he saw them photographed in hats he had made because they were a little over the top in their estimation. And after leaving the salon, they might have removed some of the trim. And then when they were seen in public, he would notice, and his partner told me that this distressed him quite a bit. His partner was very generous to us after Philip Ward's death. He donated many of Philip's finished and unfinished hats to our museum, as well as many patterns, all of his felt patterns, and many of his hat blocks as well. I want to show you this piece, which I think is quite remarkable. This is a wedding piece made by Philip Ward, and it is lace, wonderfully done, stiffened, very late 1960s. This would sit at the back of the head. It could have a veil attached, and it's just a wonderful piece. I will say as well that Philip had some celebrity clients, one of whom was Elizabeth Taylor when she married Richard Burton for the second time. I think it was the second time. Yeah, many women that I interviewed when I was researching for my book, 1,000 Hats, still had some of hats they had made by Philip, and they were quite fond of him. So we're going to add Palmer Brown to our Hat Hall of Fame, and Palmer Brown was another Toronto millinery designer, a contemporary of Philip Ward. And, you know, over the years, many feathered creations have been seen on women's heads, probably more so than you see in the trees, the birds. But this is a wonderful sculptural piece, a little cocktail hat again. And there's still some original hat pins in tipped to match the brown feathers, and then this wonderful adornment. So this is Palmer Brown's work. Now, if you go down the highway a little bit to Hamilton, you're going to find Peggy Claire. I like Peggy Claire. Her spirit was fabulous. She was very down to earth, but she created beautiful, beautiful pieces. This is an example that we have in the Millinery Museum. This is from the 1960s. It's high crowned. It's square. You don't often find square. It almost looks ecclesiastical. It's done with grosgrain ribbon and done beautifully. Again, you always want to look inside to know the quality of a well-made hat, and you can see that this is lined with satin. Now, Peggy told us that she and her, so this is the way it's worn, that she and her assistant would travel to Montreal by train on business and take a lot of hats and wear a lot of hats. They were changing their hats on the train because quite often people would see the hats that they were wearing, pieces that Peggy had designed, and while on the train they would purchase them from them. So pop on another hat, sell another hat, pop on another hat, sell another hat. I would like to have been on that train. Peggy Claire, she was a dear. And she donated some of her, well, her remaining hat blocks to the Millinery Museum because she said her husband was threatening to make firewood out of them. So some of those experiences were awfully fun for me. Okay, here is another hat label design that deserves to be in the Hat Hall of Fame. They've been around since 1908, established by the Leopold brothers from Lithuania. They set up business in Montreal. By the 1950s, they started selling outside, to Europe, etc., under the Andre label. The Andre hats are quite easy to find. At least they were when I was beginning to collect. They're still in business, so it's easy to find them. But the vintage ones are very distinctive. The Andre label, I suppose that's not going to show up too well. Okay, let me just put on this beauty. This is darling. This is from the 1960s. Just the Andre label are handmade. They have always been from like 1908. Today they sell in 400 stores around the world, and you can find these. They definitely make beautiful hats. They're very structurally sound, professionally made, and quite artistic, and have been. We have a number of scads, bins of Andre hats from the early days right up to the present day. So that's a lot of fun. And I want to also, while we're talking about designers who are still in business, I want to talk about Karen Ruiz, formerly Karen Gingras, and Karen's shop in Toronto, Lilliput. She started getting some recognition after starting to sell her pieces at the One of a Kind show. She has a wonderful business now. This is one of her hats. I can't say enough about it. I have another that I purchased not at her shop, but at a shop in Niagara on the Lake, Beau Chapeau. Hat lovers will recognize that shop. I mean, everywhere I go, especially if I know there's a hat shop in town, I'm going to purchase a hat. But the day I was there and saw this, not this one, but another one, I absolutely had to have it. And my husband said, "Don't you have enough hats?" Of course not. But I'd left my credit card at home and I had to borrow his. Well, he wasn't too happy, but I said, "Listen, I'm going to pay you as soon as I get home." It was a pricey hat, but I said I have to have it. This is a hat I could wear to a firing squad. and feel awesome in it. So I had to have it. And when I showed him, he agreed. It's called a Merry Widow, and he said, "You have to wear that at my funeral." And my daughter, when she saw it, said she would wear it to my funeral. It seems like a kind of um, a negative thing to say, but it's very, very special, and I love it. Anyway, um, Lily Put Hats, a wonderful Toronto label. Her pieces are fabulous. She even puts them on sale, and you have to grab them quick. I had two I wanted to purchase at the last sale when it came online, and I waited too long. They were gone within a couple hours. So another fun thing about Lilliput, if you purchase online, once it arrives, you're going to find the hat, but also a lovely little note inside. So I don't think the camera's picking that up too well, but a little thank you, and also the date, which I appreciate knowing when I purchased this hat. Those are the highlights. I'd like to thank you for joining me for this discussion of 20th century Canadian millinery designers. If you have any questions, please email me or find me through Facebook or Instagram. I'd love to know your thoughts about hats and what you've learned, what you'd like to learn, what you collect. That's very interesting to me. I want to especially thank the Lennox and Addington Museum for giving me this opportunity to take off the mask and put on a hat. Um, and you were all correct. This hat is made by BC milliner Maria Curcic. Thanks for watching